It came out because I got into one of my security discussions on the Debian list, which I said this whole GPG, what do they call it? Network Trust Network. What the hell they call it? Web Trust is a crock. We would be much better off if every developer signed every email that they sent to Debian so we could see all the interactions and have a history that we could actually trust and base our decisions on from that. And the reply from one guy was, well, there's no way in the world I can sign every email that I send to the Debian list because that would make my GPG keys insecure because I'd have to store them on my hard drive. And at the time I thought, you twat. And then I went and analysed it and decided that, in fact, that was accurate. There was no way, given that if we use the NIST, was it 800-63 publication, that you could rely on a password to protect a file. And so I started thinking about it and wondering why this was so. And the talk was about the technology changes that have made this so, the advancements in CPUs and CPU architectures, and how, I guess you could say, the distortions. So a modern CPU, well, less than 1% of its chip is devoted to ALUs. And an ALU is the raw unit you need to decode a password. So we use brute force to decode passwords. The way we use brute force, but the way people use brute force is they develop a list of passwords, which was quite weak originally, but now is very strong because we've had quite a few password leaks. We've developed AI techniques that have analysed those password lists and compared them against English word lists, and have then developed the sort of algorithms that humans use to twist words that we recognise into passwords. So, as I said in the talk, if you substitute E for 3, well, they know that. If you use pillow talk, well, they know all the pillow terms. If the reverse words will use dates, well, they know all that. And that, combined with advances in hardware with GPU, meant that we could invest about, 30k, you can get a GPU that will test, if you use SHA, something or other, any SHA will do. We'll test about 350 million passwords a second.
There's almost no point doing rainbow tables.
No, there is no point in doing rainbow tables. This is assuming you use Assault, right, which destroys rainbow tables. So, and 350 million, it turns out, means that in order to defeat a list, if you choose a password and they order them roughly in terms of frequency, then to get past a second, you have to be past number 350 million. But the password attacker has more than that on his side. He has time. So when we enter a password into a computer, we expect it to come back reasonably quickly to validate that password. Within a second, certainly. If you've got a server serving hundreds of requests, it's within, and you want it within a second, they have to do 100 passwords a second, so they don't have much more time. Your attacker, on the other hand, he's probably prepared to wait a week, at least. You might be prepared to wait a month. When you do the figures, if you're prepared to wait a week, he's chewed up 2 to the 19th seconds. That means you have to have 19 bits worth of entropy in your password. 19 bits is a lot of bits. If you look at the NIST 800-63L publication, it's a very conservative publication. Years ago, I thought it was hopelessly wrong. But now it's coming closer and closer to realistic, and I suspect that, in fact, it was in the long term realistic. They give you an algorithm for computing the entropy in a human-chosen password. And it turns out to get to 19 bits, you have to use, I think, somewhere in the region of 15 characters. And that can be cracked in a second.
If you have access to the hash, yes.
Well, the assumption is, all right, that's another assumption that's changed. So when I was a kid, right, years ago, I walked in to an IBM installation and I watched some guy type in, there was all these IBM terminals. And I thought, I think I saw him type in his password. So I went up and I typed in the password, but I was wrong. So the next thing that happened was that the phone on the desk rang. And someone picked up the phone and, hello, here, and said, it's for you. So I got exactly one chance at trying that password, and I was not going to try it again. Right? Effectively, what has happened is that it's changed. So, and we have never caught up. So initially, it changed. So we used to send passwords in clear text over little bits of wire called RS-232, and that was reasonably safe, right? Because someone would have to intercept the particular wire between you going into the terminal. And, you know, there's only so many people. There might be, I don't know, 10 people who could do that in the entire world. So we sent the passwords in clear text, and that was good. Then we developed Ethernet, which was a coax, which used T-taps. And for reasons that, looking back on it, still astound me, we decided that sending passwords in the clear over that Ethernet cable was a perfectly reasonable thing to do, even though anyone who had access to that cable could put in a tap and spot the Ethernet packet. So, yes?
If they had a connection, they already got the packet.
Yeah, well, that was even worse. It's just terrible. Anyway, so the point was that they applied the RS-232 thing to the Telnet and FTP and a whole pile of other protocols, all just sent the passwords in the clear. We sort of got past that, but the next thing we did was connect all the computers to the internet, and that had well, I can only describe as a very unexpected outcome. At least it's still unexpected. I still boggle. But the point is that any computer connected to the internet, I think you have to assume, is insecure. That can and will have every file that is on it read. Now, eBay recently discovered that. They had a targeted attack. Their network engineers, we believe, were sent emails from people who had researched their personal lives, knew their friends, their interests, the companies they dealt with, and crafted personal emails targeted at each individual that looked exactly like it came from someone they trusted and knew with the appropriate attachments. Someone within eBay opened that email, and as a consequence, every password on eBay got leaked. I think it was the hash version, but the hash version is basically insecure, as the whole point of this password talk. So, for example, we personally had $200 ripped off us out of that, because my wife, a little box says I don't need PayPal authorisation if I've authorised with eBay. So we lost several $100s through our PayPal account through that particular link. And they can do this at will. Yes, Mark?
They give it back.
They have now, yeah. So I think it's safe to assume, if eBay can't protect their servers with their password databases, Google did in China, but I don't know of any other company that would be capable of it, frankly. And I'm sort of stunned that Google managed to do it, because they were also on the receiving end of exactly the same targeted attacks in China. Yes, Mark? Oh, I see.
I wasn't working for Google at the time.
I imagine that, you know, once you have one incidence of that sort of thing, that, you know, the top tier companies like Google are probably warning.
Anyway, the consequence of this was that even when the password was leaked, when you tested a Unix system, what have you, Unix has a very simple defence. You type in the password wrong, it waits for 1 second. You type in the password wrong again, it waits for 2 seconds. Type in the password wrong again, it waits for 4 seconds, and so on. It works very well. It means if you're going to move through this 350 million password list, you get very, very slow very quickly, and by the time you've got to sort of password, 10,000, you've gone past the age of the universe. What this ability the internet did in rendering every computer on the internet insecure has actually done is mean that people can download the password databases. And once they download the password databases, all these artificial time constraints we put on it, like web authentication, disappear. As soon as it disappears, they are in control of how long it takes to check a password. And thus we get to the 350 million. There is no other constraint. So the question then became, given that is true, and like as I gave the talk, it turned out the night before a Debian developer had been arrested and had his laptop with GPG keys to the Debian infrastructure confiscated. He was in Brazil. And he was arrested and locked up because he had demonstrated insecurity in a government website and reported it to the government. And the security personnel retaliated by locking him up and confiscating all his hardware. And Debian was in a mad scramble at that point because suddenly the keys to the kingdom were in the open and we had to change all our package signatures and validate all the keys and send security patches to every Debian machine out there, and yeah, it's a mess. And so I was giving this talk and I was asking myself, how can this be circumvented? Well, the only way it can be circumvented is a key with enough entropy bits. Right? So you have to have enough bits that you're not 350 million down, you're actually billions down. Right, that's the only way to solve the problem. So then I asked myself, well, what is the likelihood of a human thinking up a password that they can remember, that they thought up, that has this much entropy? And for that, I relied on ST863. And the answer is, if you have somewhere between a 20 and 30 character password, you're going to have somewhere between 40 bits of entropy. Now, this assumes, mind you, that you have done all the obvious things. You haven't used words, and names and dates associated with it. You've mixed upper and lower case. You've got symbols and other things, and you've done all the obvious. Assuming you've done that, you're going to, even though it's a 20 to 30 character page, you're only going to end up with 40 bits of entropy. And when it's all said and done, 40 bits of entropy is simply not enough, right? It's when you've got password crackers and you've got someone like NSA who's prepared to develop, probably $100 million out of it, prepared to wait months. You just add those numbers up and you get well beyond 40, right? They're going to crack it easily. So the question was, is it possible to solve this problem? And the answer is yes, it is possible to solve this problem. It is possible to make a human memorable password secure. And I'm not going to go much beyond that because I'll just write up a URL and you can read the rest of it at the URL.
I just thought you might like to know how much fun you have when you try to do a merge request to your code
Sad.
on fucking SourceForge.
You like it?
This says, we're sorry, but we weren't able to process this request.
So if you're interested in how this guy could have protected his GPG keys such that he could carry them on his laptop or publish them on a website so that everyone could download the file and still make them secure with just a password that he could memorise, then I published just this week, this is all lowercase.
Maybe the shadow, but I can't read that.
It might be a different Well, maybe I won't write it to trace. I'll write it and read it.
What's the name of the SourceForge project?
Password-based key definition function tool.
Sorry, but
PWP.
you just write it again. Just quicker.
Just the SourceForge name.
PPKDF2.
PBKDF.
In lowercase.
Right, so can Clinton, can you shift? Sorry.
Oh, this is our
Professional ABC team.
yes.
Well, I can. You put it up onto your bloody laptop. Do you want us to do that?
No, it's all right.
Just the realism is that I did not think after this guy wins that this would be a difficult problem to solve, and it turned out to be an unbelievably complex problem to solve. Just simply protecting a file with a password requires you to consider how modern CPUs are built and what the constraints on that are. It's just quite extraordinary.